The first stop on the ear tour is the outer ear. It consists of the auricle or pinna, the external auditory canal, and the tympanic membrane. Let's start with the auricle. It is the outermost part of the ear. There are many parts to it, starting with the helix, the scaphoid fossa, the antihelix, the earlobe, the antitragus, the intertrachic incisure, which is right here, the tragus, which is also right here, and the cavum concha, right here in the middle, the crus of the helix is right here, the cymba concha is right here, the triangular fossa is located right here, and the crura of the antihelix is right here. Its function is to trap and receive sound, and it boosts high-frequency sounds. It also allows us to determine the direction of the sound source.
The external auditory canal consists of the lateral 1/3 cartilaginous portion of the external auditory meatus, and next to that is the medial 2/3 bony portion of the external auditory meatus. Above that is the temporal bone, and we also have the tympanic membrane at the end, which is right here and not shown. The function of the ear canal is to keep the eardrum warm. It warms the incoming air before it reaches the tympanic membrane. Also located in the external auditory meatus are the cerumen glands. These glands produce cerumen or earwax, which is produced in the outer 1/3 portion of the ear canal. Cerumen is very important to our auditory system because it protects it from foreign objects and it aids it naturally cleaning the canal.
If we move medially, we encounter the tympanic membrane or eardrum. It is a concave-shaped layer of membrane that is located at the end of the external auditory canal. The tympanic membrane helps to improve sound transmission to the inner ear. It consists of 3 different layers. There is the lateral layer, center layer, which is the fibrous portion and has connective tissue, and the medial layer that is open to the middle ear. When sound travels down the external auditory canal, they eventually reach the tympanic membrane and strike it, causing the membrane to vibrate. These vibrations are then transferred to the ossicles of the middle ear.
The middle ear, also known as the tympanic cavity, can be divided into 3 sections: the epitympanum, the mesotympanum, and the eustachian tube. The ossicles are 3 tiny bones located in the middle ear and consist of the malleus, the incus, and the stapes.
The tympanic cavity can be divided into 6 walls. Let's start with the superior wall. Located on this wall is the tegmen tympani. The tegmen tympani is a thin sheet of bone that separates the middle ear from the brain and the meninges. Moving on to the inferior wall or floor, there is the groove of the jugular fossa, which is located right below this floor. The jugular fossa contains the jugular vein. Covering this groove and the rest of the inferior floor is the tympanic plate of the temporal bone. The lateral wall is next and consists of the tympanic membrane and the squamous portion of the temporal bone right above that. Across from the lateral wall is the medial wall. This wall has quite a few landmarks. One that was mentioned before is the oval window. This contains the footplate of the stapes and has a small membrane that allows the footplate to activate the fluids in the inner ear when sound vibrations trigger the ossicles to move. Below the oval window is the round window, which also has a membrane covering it and accesses the scala tympani duct of the cochlea. The promontory of the cochlea is formed by the basal turn of the cochlea and has the tympanic nerve running around it as well, which is right here. We also have the prominence of the facial nerve canal, and the prominence of the horizontal semicircular canal.
The posterior wall contains the tympanic adytus, the fossa incutus, which articulates with the short process of the incus, and the pyramidal eminence. The pyramidal eminence contains the stapedius muscle, which contains one end of the tendon of the stapes with the other end attaching it to the stapes bone. The chorda tympani nerve, which is involved with taste, passes through the meeting point of the posterior and lateral walls. The sixth and final wall is the anterior wall. Located on this wall is the carotid canal, which is separated from the wall with a thin sheet of bone. There is also the canal of the tensor tympani, where the tensor tympani muscle runs through it. The entrance to the eustachian tube is located here, and there is a sheet of bone called the canalis musculotuberi that separates this from the tensor tympani. So far, I have mentioned two muscles located in the middle ear. These muscles are responsible for contracting loud noises to protect the auditory system.
There are 6 ligaments in the middle ear. They allow the ossicles to vibrate when sound passes through, but also brings them back to their resting position. The middle ear is responsible for converting the sound waves' acoustical energy into mechanical energy. This is done through the middle ear impedance matching system. The ratio of the diameter of the tympanic membrane and the round window is 17:1, which means that the sound pressure in a larger area of the tympanic membrane is then transferred to the smaller area of the oval window. Also, the ossicular chain rocks back and forth and acts as a lever to increase the pressure on the oval window. With the lever action, the mechanical energy increases when it reaches the oval window, which then increases the movement of the inner ear fluid. Beyond the footplate of the stapes is the inner ear. The inner ear is separated into 3 basic areas: the vestibule, the cochlea, and the semicircular canals. The vestibule then leads to the cochlea. The cochlea consists of 3 ducts: the scala vestibuli, the scala tympani, and the scala media. The scala vestibuli is where the fluid of the inner ear, or perilymph, gets displaced first and travels through this bony canal and turns at the helicotrina and goes into the scala tympani, which is another bony canal that contains the same perilymph traveling in the opposite direction, which eventually pushes up against the round window. The scala media is the middle canal between the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani. It is also known as the cochlear duct and is a membranous canal. This membranous canal also contains a fluid known as endolymph. So looking at a cross-section of the cochlea, we can dissect the 3 canals in the cochlea. We can see Reisner's membrane lining the scala vestibuli and the basilar membrane lining the scala tympani. Within the scala media, there is the organ of Corti, which is the sensory organ and receives vibrations from the basilar membrane, which it resides on top of. Okay. The organ of Corti has some very important parts to it. The outer hair cells line the basilar membrane and are sensory cells. The inner hair cells are more medial to the modiolus, or the center of the cochlea, and line up in one row on the basilar membrane. Next is the Corti's tunnel, right here, which separates the inner and the outer hair cells and acts as a supporting structure. Also, there's the tectorial membrane that is a gelatinous membrane and has the cilia of the outer hair cells embedded in it. On the lateral side, there is the spiral ligament, which is located on this end, which gives the scala media structure and holds it in place between the 2 bony canals. The stria vascularis, which is also located over here, but on the medial side, creates endolymph for the scala media. This liquid provides oxygen and nutrients to the cochlea. Finally, the spiral lamina is a bony shell that supports, which is located over here, which supports the basilar membrane.
As mentioned before, the stapes displaces the fluid into the vascular vestibule, and the vibrations from this are transferred to the vascular media through the Resner's membrane. The endolymph is then disturbed, and the vibrations continue to displace the basilar membrane, which ends in the round window being displaced by the middle ear cavity. This causes a wave-like motion and starts at the base of the cochlea and travels to the apex. Tones of low frequency show their maximum displacement near the apex of the cochlea, while the tones of high frequency show their maximum displacement near the base of the cochlea. When the basilar membrane moves, the cilia from the hair cells are sheared against the tectorial membrane. This then leads to depolarization, or electrical output being sent to the brain, or hyperpolarization, which is when hearing information does not continue to be sent to the brain. The outer hair cells are responsible for enhancing the frequency. The outer hair cells also help the inner hair cells receive sound by making themselves shorter, so the inner hair cells can make contact with the tectorial membrane.
Connected to the cochlea are the three semicircular canals. There is the anterior canal, the posterior canal, and horizontal canal. They are responsible for balance, and the fluids within them move depending on which direction you move your head. At the end of each of these semicircular canals are ampullae. These three ampullae are where the semicircular canals meet with the utricle, which we will talk about shortly. Within the ampullae are crista, which are the end organs for the semicircular canals. The crista aid in your spatial awareness. When your head turns side to side, as if you are saying no, for example, the fluid in the horizontal semicircular canal located on the side you move to activates the crista on that side only, while the other horizontal semicircular canal is inhibited. This is how you know to move your eyes in the direction that you are turning your head, and it informs your brain of where you are turning. This same rule goes for the superior semicircular canal when you move your head up and down, and the posterior semicircular canal when you move your head side to side. The utricle, as we mentioned before, is connected to all of the semicircular canals via the ampullae. The utricle has a membranous sac filled with endolymph that is stationed on the horizontal plane. Located perpendicular to the utricle is the saccule, which is also a membranous sac filled with endolymph, but it is positioned on the vertical plane. Within the utricle and saccule are maculae, which are their end organs. The utricle and its macula are responsible for sensing horizontal movement, like when you are traveling in a car. The saccule and its macula are responsible for sensing vertical movement, like when you brace yourself for the up and down movement of an elevator. And that is the end of the ear tour.